What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Film vs. Analytics show here on FantasyPoints.com. I'm your host, Brett Whitefield. I am the film expert. I'm going to be joined by my co-host, Scott Barrett, the CEO of FantasyPoints.com. He is the analytics expert, and the goal of the show is to go player by player in this year's rookie class. We're going to debate film versus analytics. This is show number 2. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Tonight, we're jumping into Marvin Harrison Jr., though. So, Scott, why don't you start us off? Give us your analytical take on the Ohio State stud muffin, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah. So the way my process works is I start with my model. I use that as a sort of a baseline, and then I'll make manual adjustments from there. I penalize slot players. I penalize players who are overly reliant on screens and other types of what I deem to be fraudulent production. And so on the first pass of my model, Harrison looked great. He looked really, really good, but not elite. Malik Neighbors actually did look elite. Yeah, I had him as a top 5 wide receiver prospect this past decade. But then Neighbors dropped back down below Harrison after some manual adjustments. And then Harrison, meanwhile, had like literally zero warts, which is like so hard to find from a prospect. Jamar Chase is like the only ever perfect, totally wart free, perfect wide receiver prospect. And Harrison actually had a bunch of green flags. But that being said, it's still not really an elite profile. It felt like it would have been easier for me than it was to make that argument. Again, he's really, really good, really, really safe. The wide receiver one in this class, but just not a CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase range of a prospect. Some key stats: he had the best in class yards per route run against man coverage. He had the second and third best seasons by outside yards per route run. He had one of the most diverse route trees in the class. One of my favorite metrics everyone knows is age adjusted yards per route run. So since 2016, there's only been 7 wide receivers with multiple seasons in the top 75th percentile by age adjusted yards per route run. I might have removed a few guys who are like 50+% slot share. But anyway, on that list, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have CeeDee Lamb, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown. So that's a really good sort of, you can measure a stat by the top X on that list. And so he looks pretty good there. But what's interesting to me is, again, I keep coming back to the fact that he wasn't quite elite, at least not on the first pass of my model. And now we're seeing, literally today as we're recording, Lance Zierlein, Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, all leaking out that multiple NFL teams are sort of all over the board on who actually is the wide receiver one in this class. We saw Chris Sims put Harrison behind both Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. He cited a lack of explosion, a lack of separation. And if I want to be nitpicky, I did see those same concerns, at least a little bit. Trey, our producer, can pull up the stat here: 14th percentile contested target rate. That's what I use as a proxy for separation. And then the after the catch metrics certainly left a lot to be desired there. So, Brett, I need some help here. I just conceded the point earlier. Um, you know, I think analytics can help give you a baseline, but for the sort of context and nuance that we're looking for, it might take an elite film mind such as yourself. So, Marvin Harrison Jr., how good is he? Is he the wide receiver one in the class? Is he really a quote unquote generational wide receiver prospect?
So here's what I'll do. I'll blast through my pros and cons of Marvin Harrison Jr. real quick, like a quick scouting report, and then I'll address some of your concerns head on. So pros, when you're talking Marvin Harrison Jr., you're talking about prototype size and athletic profile, right? So like the last 3-4 years, we haven't had those prototype X receivers in the league. Pretty easy for people, sitting in an analytical chair to say, oh, well, the league's going away from those guys. It's not really true. I think some of the best receivers in the league are big X type guys. Harrison is that guy. So we've been void of those players in this draft. He is the prototype X receiver. I think he's an incredible athlete. I don't see any concern. I've seen Chris Sims say he lacks explosiveness. I think that is complete hootenanny. That is ridiculous I mean, I think the athleticism jumps off the page anytime you watch him. He's an excellent route runner, especially for his size. When you're talking big X receivers, it's pretty rare to have a guy that can run routes. You mentioned the route tree diversity. One of the things I really like to scout with guys that are profiling as a wide receiver one is how well they run routes over the middle of the field. Can they stack defenders? Can they get them off balance? Can they sell the route that they're running? And Harrison is excellent on dig routes. It's one of the harder routes to run for a big guy. His ability to sink his hips, to keep those ankles unlocked and kind of break on acute angles, it's unparalleled for a guy his size. So yes, he is the complete package at wide receiver. He can attack all three levels of the field. I really, really enjoy watching him with the ball in his hands, and I know you've talked about some run after catch concerns here, Scott, but that is not a concern of mine. I think you have to look at the role he was asked to play at Ohio State. He was a boundary receiver. Most of his catches came along the boundary on go routes and stop routes, comebacks where there's no rack opportunity built in. We kind of had the same conversation with a guy like Cedric Tillman last year. Very similar role. Now, obviously, Ohio State doesn't play that extreme spread that Tennessee plays, but when he's catching the ball with his foot basically on the boundary and he's just getting shoved out of bounds, there's no chance for rack. But when they did design it up for him, when they did scheme it up for him to get the ball in his hands, he was excellent after the catch. You see all the traits you're looking for in a guy who's going to dominate after the catch at the next level. His ability to locate defenders immediately, his ability to transition with the ball in his hands is excellent. He's got make you miss moves, uh, awesome vision and speed in the open field. Excellent stuff. And then lastly, Scott, my favorite thing about Marvin Harrison Jr. is the release package. There was no wide receiver, probably in my 9 years of scouting players, Scott, that had as many reps beating press coverage as Marvin Harrison Jr. did at the college level. When you talk about a lack of separation, that's all you're seeing is just a guy who's routinely getting pressed on the boundary, having to defeat that press. He's got a great release package. He's got a foot fire release package. He's got a diamond burst release game, great hand usage. His hands and his feet are always synced up, really limits the amount of contact he allows defenders to get into his chest plate, and he beats press pretty much at will. So I think he checks all those boxes. The separation stuff is absolutely there. I think he's a phenomenal separator downfield, despite what Chris Sims says, or whatever the contested rate stat that you provided us says. Anything else?
Yeah, I just disagree. I think he's a bust. I think if his last name was Jackson, we wouldn't even know who this guy is. I think no, I'm just messing with you. Yeah, so you're saying, oh, he's great after the catch, but
Yeah.
the numbers really just don't bear that out. You're saying he's, contrary to his contested target rate. No, 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 he gets open at will. It's just that's just not the case analytically, and so maybe there's more context there. The context, one context you could use is maybe whoever's charting these metrics are just not doing a good job. That was the case with Drake London famously,
Well,
where yeah, I
hold,
put a
hold on a
tweet.
sec. Let's talk about Drake. So it wasn't just bad charting. It's just you have to apply context to charting. So Drake London had 53 contested catch opportunities his final year at USC, right? You and I watched all 53 of them, and how many of them were the result of a bad throw or a schemed up play? If you're throwing an end zone fade to a wide receiver, it's going to be contested by default. Marvin Harrison Jr. probably had more end zone fades than any player of the last decade. I mean, these are all things you can point to. Kyle McCord is a really bad quarterback. I mean, really bad quarterback. He went from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord. The contested catch rate or contested catch opportunity by percentage skyrocket. So I don't think that's a coincidence when you see the way Ohio State was using him and then also the quarterback play. Like also he got a ton of extra attention and coverage as well. Like a lot of routes where he's breaking over the middle of the field. He's got a safety bearing down on him with a corner in his hip pocket. I mean, that's like you're just naturally going to run into a lot of contested situations.
Yeah, I don't have access to how many end zone fades he ran, but I think that's good context that could explain it. I can't put it all on Kyle McCord because it does predate Kyle McCord. It was the same thing in 2022. This isn't red flag levels like it is for Keon Coleman or Johnny Wilson, where the hit rate is like really abysmal. It's just like sort of on the cusp of that red flag range, and it's just something I need more more information on. And so, it certainly could just be the end zone fade, like you're talking about. And when you bring up that, he got extra attention, that kind of helps things out as well, because looking at his numbers, he really didn't separate himself from Amika Egbuka all that much in 2022. And then even in 2023 to extent before Egbuka dealt with injuries. And I know quarterback play wasn't great last year, but that was also like Marvin Harrison Jr.'s boy. Like they played together in high school. They're close personal friends. And so those were just a few things that stood out to me. And again, I know you like him after the catch, just the numbers weren't good there. And so, like I started off at the top, like these are just questions I have
Yeah,
that's going to take an elite film mind such as yourself to answer and help dissuade me of any concerns.
right on. So where we landing here? Where is he at in your rankings right now, Scott?
Yeah. So, you know, wide receiver one, it makes all the sense in the world. 102 pick, that makes all the sense in the world. And I'm sure you agree with that. The question I'll pose to you is it goes back to that. Well, is he generational? And so, if you wanted to trade out of this pick, you can get a lot because, within the in the NFL mock draft cognoscenti space, he's not the runaway wide receiver one generational talent. You do have people leaking that there are NFL teams who disagree with that. But in the dynasty fantasy space, it's no, no, no. This is a generational talent. And so when I look at this, I'm thinking of people keep saying, like, who is the Puka Nakua of this year's class? But it's like, would I rather have Puka Nakua than Marvin Harrison Jr.? I think that's a serious debate. I mean, Puka Nakua had a better career yards per route run than any receiver in this class. He just had the most receiving yards of any rookie wide receiver in NFL history. And so that's kind of my frame of reference point is you can trade Marvin Harrison Jr., the 102 for Puka plus. Would you do that or do you see Harrison as this sort of generational talent?
No, that's a great question. First of all, the term generational talent needs to be retired. I'm putting it in the retirement bin right next to knows ball, he knows ball, she knows ball. That's such a dumb phrase. And then also prospect fatigue. These are all dumb phrases we got to stop using. Okay. But no, generational talent's a dumb word. I don't think he's a generational talent. No, I mean there's phenomenal wide receivers that come in the league every single year. He scores as one of the better players I've ever watched at the position, but I wouldn't call him generational. And to your point, if you can get a Puka Nakua plus type of haul for him, I feel like you have to take that. We've got proof of concept at the NFL level with Puka already. We don't have that with Marvin Harrison Jr. There's no such thing as a perfect prospect, right? And there is a non-zero chance that maybe eventually doesn't live up to the hype. So it is what it is. I definitely agree with you. I would take the haul. I would take the Puka Nakua haul.
All right, all right. So I think we've settled this, but let's end on what everyone wants, which is Brett. Give me a baseline comp, a downside comp, and an upside comp. I'll give you a comp myself. You know who Marvin Harrison Jr. reminds me a lot of, and I know this is lofty because he's a Hall of Famer, but when I see him, I just can't help but think of Marvin Harrison Sr. for some reason.
Okay, I mean that's fair.
No, yeah, I
Okay,
mean, I have no idea. So you tell me. You watched every single snap he's ever played. So what's your comp?
yeah, my ceiling comp is AJ Green, or I should say style comp. I don't really do ceiling floor comps, Scott. You know that. I do style comps. When I watch Marvin Harrison Jr., I see AJ Green. I see the same vertical skill set. I see the ball tracking skills. I see the contested catch ability. I see the deep separation, the ability to run away from just about anybody. Remind body control along the boundary. All reminds me of AJ Green. So I didn't prepare if this doesn't work out comp. I'm trying to think on the fly here. I'm just gonna stick with AJ Green. I think that's the style comp. That's who he reminds me of. I can't unsee it. And so AJ Green is my comp.
I think that's a great one. I think dynasty players would be super happy with what was it, 7 straight Pro Bowls, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah,
So yeah, and I think that fits perfectly from what I've seen on tape.
right on. All right, he is my wide receiver one in the class too. Just to plant that flag firmly. I don't think for me there's no debate. I love Rome. I love Malik. They're not quite there for me. So
Wide receiver one and a tier
wide
gap.
receiver one, I think Rome is a lot closer to Marv than Malik, but that's for a different show, Scott.
Ooh,
So
yeah, I'm going to disagree
but
with that,
that's-
but okay.
yeah.